As a writer, one of the first questions you have to answer for yourself is, what verb tense are you going to write in? This is such an important question for writers because regardless of what type of writing you're doing, all writing is some kind of narrative art. You have to decide what sort of relationship your viewer has to the events depicted, and what sort of relationship the events depicted have to each other. Today we're going to go deep with this question by turning to Ursula K. Guin, one of the all-time great sci-fi fantasy writers out there. We're going to hear Ursula talk at length about why present tense is a bold, bizarre, and maybe slightly unnatural choice for prose writers. But before we get to Ursula, I just want to say, hi, my name's Josh. I am a recovering academic. I have 3 degrees. I'm a professional reader for writing contests, and I am currently putting all of my expertise, everything I've learned in my entire life, into bite-sized videos here on YouTube to share with a community of writers and people who are curious about storytelling. Personally, I've always found it really funny how most novels are written in the past tense, but when you write about a novel, you write an essay in an English class about a novel, you're supposed to talk about the events that happen in the novel in the present tense. It's kind of weird, right? So you might read in a novel something like, Mike inserted the needle in his arm and felt that sweet nothing enter his veins. But in your essay, you would write, on page 52, Mike shoots up. Present tense. I don't know about you, but for me, I've never had a problem with the past tense in prose. It just always kind of felt natural. What was strange to me was when I started reading and writing screenplays, and I had to get accustomed to the present tense, which, in case you don't know, is the standard for screenplay. But you know, after some thinking about it, it actually makes a lot of sense for a screenplay to be in the present tense, because a screenplay is trying to emulate the experience of watching the film. And in a film, events, objects, dialogue, it all passes by in a sort of concrete visual that remains absolutely in the present moment, 1 frame at a time, 24 frames per second. Now, when I started working as a reader for prose contests, for short story contests, I was pretty astounded at how many of them were written in the present tense. In my experience, I would say maybe 1/3 of the stories I read at these contests are written in the present tense. Now, the first few I read, I thought, wow, what a bold and unique choice to do this in the present tense. That's so avant-garde. But I also kind of thought, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? What do you gain by doing this, aesthetically speaking? But the more I read on, the more I saw examples of this, and then I realized this is not a bold avant-garde choice by one eccentric writer. This is a new norm. And maybe it's expressing some deeper ideas about the ideology of our society. So, without further ado, let's hear from Ursula K. Guin, who has a lot to say about this, and I'm just going to read a huge section from this book. In case you don't know this book, this is Steering the Craft. Now, I know there's a lot of books out there about writing. Most of them have to do with storytelling, with characters, with character arcs, with structure. This is by far the best book about form, about the craft of writing, about how to craft beautiful sentences that add up to beautiful paragraphs. For all the prose writers out there, and even screenplay writers, I highly recommend seeking out a copy of this book. So here's what she has to say. The past tense, she did it, he was there, and the present tense, she does it, he is there, are both capable of variations expressing such things as continuity of action and how events relate in time. She was making a living before he had even begun looking for a job. Priority or subsequence in time is easy to express in the past tense, but the present tense is less flexible, tending to cling to the present. She is making a living before he even begins to look for a job. Now I'm going to interrupt Ursula here because this is absolutely true, and if you read a piece of prose written in the present tense, unless it's a flash fiction piece that's 100 words long, you will most likely find a spot where they veer out of present tense to describe the relationship of events like she's given examples of here. In fact, it is incredibly hard to cleave to present tense at all times. Otherwise, you end up with completely nonsensical grammatical constructions like the one she just gave an example of here. So it bears remembering that when writers commit to writing a piece in the present tense, they will often have to break the present tense. They will often have to step out of the present tense now and then in order to make sense. Abstract discourse is always in the present tense. I'm writing it right now. Generalities aren't time-bound, and so philosophers, physicists, mathematicians, and God all speak in the present tense. Screenplays appear to be in the present tense, but they're actually in the imperative voice. They're instructions. They say what is to happen on screen. Dick grins at Jane, fires. Blood splatters the lens. Close up. Spot falls dead. These aren't descriptions. They tell the actors, the cameraman, the ketchup person, the dog, and everybody else what to do. Another interruption here, because this is the first time I've ever heard someone say this, that screenplays are in the imperative voice. They're not actually in the present tense. And it's so true. Anyone who's been at a table read and heard someone who is just reading the descriptions feels the truth of this statement. The descriptions, as we call them, are also called action, the action. What does the action say? And as you read it in the present tense, you're really getting the sense that that narrator is speaking directly to the actor, telling them what they're to do next. We use the present tense above all in talking, in conversation. How are you? I'm fine, thanks. As soon as we start narrating, we tend naturally to drop into the past tense. What happened? I backed into a car that was backing out of where it was parked. Eyewitness narration is, of course, in the present tense. Oh my god, it's catching fire! Or, he's crossing the 50-yard line, he's in the clear now! Or in the communication that tells you about the tasty fugu fish your friend is eating as he tweets to you just before he dies in agony. For several thousand years, stories were told and written mainly in the past tenses, with an occasional dramatic passage in what was then called the historical present. For the past 30 years or so, many writers have been using only the present tense for narratives, fictional and non-fictional. By now, the present tense is so omnipresent that young writers may think it's obligatory. A very young one said to me, "The old dead writers lived in the past, so they couldn't write in the present, but we can." Evidently, the mere name present tense leads people to assume that it's about now, and that the past tense is about long ago. This is awfully naive. Verb tenses have so little connotation to actual presentness or pastness that they are, in most respects, interchangeable. The thing to remember is that, after all, a written story, whether it's imaginary or based on real events, exists only on the page. Both present tense and past tense narration are totally fictive. Present tense narration persuades people that it's more real because it sounds like eyewitness narration. And the reason most writers give for using it is that it's more immediate. Some justify it aggressively. We live in the present, not in the past. Another interruption here, because I think it's interesting that some artists strive for immediacy when they are working in media. The arts are media. They mediate. That's what they do. The goal of the artist, I think, is to make a nice mediation. Not necessarily to efface the fact that it's a mediation and trick us into thinking that these events are actually immediate. To me, that's illusionism. But anyway, that's just me. Back to Ursula. Well, to live in the present only would be to live in the world of newborn infants or of people who have lost their long-term memory. Living in the present isn't all that easy for most of us. Being present in the present, really living in it, is one of the goals of awareness meditation, which people practice for years. Being human, we spend most of the time with our head full of what is not right here, right now. Thinking about this, wondering about that, remembering something, planning to do something else, talking to somebody somewhere on a cell phone, texting somebody else, and only occasionally trying to put it all together to become aware of, to make sense of, the present moment. I see a big difference between the past and present tenses, not as immediacy, but as complexity and size of field. A story told in the present tense is necessarily focused on action in a single time and therefore a single place. Use of the past tenses allows continual referring back and forth in time and space. That's how our minds normally work, moving around easily. Only in emergency situations do they focus very tightly on what's going on. And so narration in the present tense sets up a kind of permanent artificial emergency, which can be exactly the right tone for fast-paced action. And maybe that's why it appeals so much to us, the anxious generation. Past tense can also focus tightly, but it always gives access to time before and after the moment of the narrative. The moment it describes is a moment continuous with its past and future. The difference is like the difference between a narrow beam flashlight and sunlight. One shows a small, intense, brightly lit field with nothing around it. The other shows the world. The quality of limitation may attract a writer to the present tense. Its tightly focused beam of attention affords the writer and reader the detachment of visible artifice. It brings the field very close like a microscope, yet distances by eliminating the surround. It cuts out, minimizes. It keeps the story cool. It can be a wise choice for a writer whose engine is liable to overheat. It also reflects the huge influence of film, not screenplay, on our imaginations. Excellent writers, James Tiptree Jr. among them, have said that they see the action of the story as they write it, exactly like a film. So their use of the present tense is a kind of imaginary eyewitness reporting. These limitations and implications of present tense narration are worth thinking about. So you can see Ursula Le Guin is not completely dismissive of present tense. She thinks it's an interesting choice that could lead to a unique type of writing and a unique type of narrative. However, something I want to say here is that eyewitness reporting is not literary. Forming sentences, any sentence, even a simple sentence, is slower than witnessing events happening before you, especially if you want that sentence to have any kind of literary flourish. I mean, just imagine coming up with the insights and the turns of phrase that you find in something like Moby Dick on the fly while describing the events occurring in front of you at that very moment. And we can insert a discourse on medium specificity here because, in my opinion, what makes a novel or a short story, what makes prose art unique as a medium is its slowness, is the interiority, the way that I might in real life speak a sentence, have a short pause, then speak another sentence. But in that short pause, that only lasted a second or so, in a novel might expand to be 2-3 paragraphs, where a flood of emotion comes in, images of my childhood. I suddenly put things together and I see with clarity something I never saw before. That's the power of prose, is to get inside of our minds and slow down time. But let's return to Ursula. She's got a bit more to say. The novelist Lynn Sharon Schwartz argued that present tense narration, avoiding temporal context and historical trajectory, oversimplifies, suggesting that nothing is terribly complex, that understanding, such as it is, can be achieved by naming objects or accumulating data, and that all we can ever understand is what can be understood from a glimpse. This externality and narrowness of its field of vision may be why so much present tense narrative sounds cool, flat, unemotional, uninvolved, and therefore all rather alike. I suspect some people write in the present tense because they're afraid not to. She had had some trouble with the past perfect tense in an earlier life. In her next life, she will not be going to have any trouble with the future perfect tense. But she would have liked never to have had any trouble at all. Okay, what's Ursula doing there? She is showing you how the verb tense itself can actually be part of the storytelling. It can say more than what you actually put in the content of the phrase. She's talking here about reincarnation, what the person's going to want. You can't do that. You can't express that idea if you just cling to present tense. That's just not an idea that the present tense can handle. And she doesn't come out and explain that to you. She just puts it in brackets right there so you can see it. You may not have learned all the fancy names for the various tenses, but don't worry. You know how to do it. All that stuff is in your head and has been ever since you learned to say I went instead of I goed. If you always write and read in present tense, some of the verb forms in your head may not have been activated for a long time. To regain free use of them is to increase your range of options as a storyteller. All art involves limitation, but a writer who uses only one tense seems a bit like a painter who, out of a whole set of oil paints, uses only pink. I mean, I think that's the perfect analogy, because doing a painting only using pink, it is bold, it's very avant-garde, but once you've done it once, you see it. That's all it is. It's the same thing over and over. My general point is this. At the moment, the present tense is in fashion, but if you're not comfortable with it, don't let yourself be crowded into using it. For some people and some stories, it's right. For others, not. The choice is important and entirely up to you. That concludes the Le Guin quote, but I want to add something here. In fact, I'm going to go even further than Le Guin. She remains very open-minded and said there's a time and a place for present tense narration. That may be true, but on the whole, I think it's the wrong choice. Think about it this way. A camera can capture events as they happen. Language does not work that way. If you are constructing sentences that may express complex ideas, that may explore complicated relationships, that may have aesthetic qualities to them, you cannot pretend that those sentences are merely capturing reality, or that they can be constructed at the same speed that events occur. A descriptive sentence is inherently in the past tense, in my opinion, because by the time you even begin to construct the sentence, the event you're trying to describe has already slipped away. By the time you get to the end of that sentence, another event will have already happened that you are now late to describing. And that's not even to begin the discussion of narration. And what is narration? Where is that narration coming from? Is it coming from somewhere imminent within the moment? Are we privy to the thoughts of the character? Or is this some sort of abstract, ethereal witness that has access into the thoughts and feelings of human beings? If it's the latter, if it's this abstract force, then it must exist in some sense outside of time. It's at least somewhat transcendent of time. Into that perspective, that transcendent perspective, wouldn't all events be somehow past, already having happened? It's an open question. I'd like to hear what you think. That's it for now. I do plan to do more content like this, talking about writing, talking about prose, talking about medium specificity. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for being a part of this. Please check out my Substack below, where I'm slowly posting my backlog of short stories. I have a podcast that's linked below. Haven't Seen It Pod. It's the world's greatest podcast. And I have a Patreon where I have bonus video essays, including one on Galaxy Quest, one on Christopher Nolan. Get on there, check it out. Be my friend. I love you all. This is my cat attacking his tail. Please pray for him. Hey, Ziggy. He needs your prayers. Please.